It is Dynasty Orphan season. A lot of vacancies being filled across your leagues by yourself, maybe as the commissioner, but also an opportunity to join an existing league. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, this is different than a startup draft. It is handpicking a team already selected for you. What are some important criteria and things to consider before you dive into the journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really a couple of strategic things that I do. The number one thing that I look to think about when I adopt a Dynasty Orphan is remember, you don't have any bias towards selecting the players that you selected, right? So you didn't draft the person at 103 in a rookie draft, right? You didn't do any of that stuff. You're starting with a clean slate. You should treat it that way, right? And you should learn, don't have high expectations for it and use it as a learning process, right? So it helps me trade better, right? Because I don't have any, I'm not dealing with sunk costs and all those things. I'm just taking it over fresh and just doing the best that I can with what I have given. It really helps with sort of freeing your mental weight of that. And then the other thing is I really look at, I try and if I'm going to do it, I'm targeting a couple of, I will, if you get a list of them, right, I'm searching for Mahomes, I'm searching for Allen, I'm searching for Herbert, right, in super flex leagues, I'm searching for, Taylor, McCaffrey, right, I'm searching for elite guys on them to say, all right, like, listen, how can I sort of build around this and make it sort of a quick rebound? So that's really the thing that I think it's a two-pronged approach, one strategic in terms of it frees your mind. And it's great for trading purposes. And the other one is like, I trying to think about the couple of core players that I want to really try and build around and try and meld the two of those.
Yeah, I think it really tests your mettle for dynasty trading because you might be in an environment. I took over a dynasty team this past week that has Elijah Mitchell. Never drafted him once, didn't acquire him in a trade or a startup draft setting. So it's my first opportunity to get out there and see what's my threshold. You can aim high. You might have to start aiming middle, and eventually you might get to a point you say, this isn't the league. I've explored a lot of opportunities. I'm rolling with them, and you kind of look for positives as well. So I think it is important when you start looking at the rosters because there's a lot of options out there. And I would advise folks to, you might miss out on an opportunity or two, but just take a beat, take a breath and say, is this going to be the right setting? Because if you're looking for a project, trust me, those are out there in dozens, in droves. It's like a hive of bees. So if you're looking for that, great. But just know, I'm looking to go from 5 to 10 dynasty teams. Let me take on 5 huge, ginormous projects, that aren't like that may frustrate you. So you can learn a lot of things. You can dive into the deep end and do one of those. But what are you looking for? Because you may look for some core players that you already like. So that's something to build around. You don't have to take the time to do a startup draft. I actually think that's something I don't know if I've mentioned on any show ever talking about Orphans, which is the team's already there. You can get to trading. The rookie draft is right around the corner. You might not have to spend 2 weeks in a startup auction or in a initial draft. Not that you might not like your team more out of a startup draft, but who's got the time, right? If that's kind of your phraseology, then an Orphan might be for you. Look for, like you said, those staple players. Maybe you're looking for a team that, I don't have any teams with Mahomes or Allen and Superflex. Let me try to get that, and maybe the rest of the team is a project, but at least you have one building block or maybe multiple to start with there.
Yeah, and I think what your point is don't make all of them these big projects. You have to sort of keep have a starting point in mind. All right, is this when I take this over? What's sort of my aim, right? And I go so far as to write it down because then I sort of I'm forced to sort of be accountable to myself, which is, all right, am I trying to do this in 2 years? Am I trying to do this in 2 weeks? Am I trying to do it over a 2-month period? What's my sort of window in terms of contending, not contend, right? Sort of make a plan. And then that way, if you use the Orphan adoption process as a as a learning experience, as a tool for building a better dynasty skill set, you're then can evaluate how you're doing in that process. And again, I think that the thing that you said, Elijah Mitchell is a great example. You know, someone that we weren't in a ton on, right? Then you start exploring offers, and then that makes you a better trader, right? Because you're dealing with players. We get into these things, and how many of the players that we have on our rosters are we rostering on a quarter of our teams, right? Like it's probably a higher percentage than we would, generally think. We roster a lot of the same players over and over again. It just tends to be in a different combination, right? And so when you adopt a team, you're in a whole different pool of players, right? It'll force you to be sort of more prepared and all that stuff. So it's really stretching your mind, stretching your muscles, and making you do something that's uncomfortable. I think it's a great experience, and do it for a discount too, right? Don't, sort of what you said about, you take on, hey, I want to move from 5 to 10 teams. Like if you're adopting Orphans, you're not probably going to be super profitable right in the near term with those, right? Typically the great teams aren't abandoned. And so do you want to pay 100 cents on the dollar to do that, or can you get it for 20%? 20% of the buy-in costs. Like those are really good. I know people that bought $100 leagues for like $1 and won them, right? And that's a great return, right? So make sure you're not sinking in all of your money for an off season or getting sort of way over your skis, because you might end up with a losing end number and then sort of be in a cash crunch. That would be the other thing I would think about.
Yeah, and some of these big box sites, and the reason I thought it was applicable to cover it this week is this next week or so is probably the time that all those deep discounts go away. Those teams get filled. Like you said, the high bidder might be 10 cents on the dollar. And so this is the time that you can explore that. And again, we don't promote, certain sites over other sites or anything like that. So just you can explore those avenues for Orphans, but yeah, and that's actually how we ended up in the same division in one league, just because I found an Orphan for a discount, got in there, and now we created the Division of Death. I think we were all like within 2 games of 500 or all above 500 or something like that. So, but yeah, it is an
I have the
opportunity.
trophy right back here. You didn't see the trophy?
Somebody built their team long before I did, not to say anything. But anyway, again, if I'm not going to win it, and we both win semis and beyond. I think I lost in the semis or something like that. So it's an opportunity to get a discount, like you said, create an ROI opportunity. Some of these ones where the payout's set up, hey, all I got to do is be the weekly high scorer once, or finish third, and all of a sudden I'm making tripling my money, based on how much you paid. So think of all those types of things, because there are some opportunities where you might look and be like, this is a good roster for me. I like this. And yet it's been ignored for 2-3 months. People have been trying to fill it, and now it's 25%, 30% of the original list. The other thing I would say, and this is maybe not so much a factor anymore, but is there a certain type of format or a certain type of league? I know years ago it was the Zealots leagues. They're still around, but to get in those leagues was tough, or I remember the hyperactive leagues long ago, that there were certain types of leagues, and maybe there's notable owners in there that you can't, there's not new leagues. Therefore, you have to kind of take one over. I'm in one with SiriusXM that it was an orphan situation. I got into it. There's not a new draft coming. So if that setting, or if there's a certain commissioner, or maybe it's some 2 tight end with premium scoring and Devi and all this kind of stuff, it may be tough to find a startup draft like that. So your realistic opportunity this offseason may be an Orphan. So that would be one of my last points. And the other one is assume year one competitive. Unless you're purposely taking on a project, we say this all the time, work towards being competitive sooner rather than later, and assume week one you're trying to win. And we say that a few times a year, but that would be my last point.
Yeah, I mean that's it. We should say it more, right? I mean, we should absolutely talk about that. And you shouldn't be, listen, if you're looking at a team and it's got 2, 3, 4 guys that are in the top, 20, 30, 40, like that team should compete, right? And you should think that way, right? And so, if you want to go a different route of saying, hey, listen, I've got, I want to do a deep rebuild, like that's okay, but don't just tank your team because you've got 3 guys in the top 30 and you're like, oh, I just need to rebuild it. Like that's a team that should probably be contending.
Absolutely. We got Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 97 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. I want to remind you about the merch out there. You can look like a pro, look like a champion there with the Football Guys official gear and merchandise. That's over at shop.footballguys.com. Hats, shirts, outerwear, coffee mugs, anything you need, quality designs and materials. Jordan's got some of it. All the staff has some of the swag, and we've been trying out. So again, you want to look like a pro, and everyone going to fear you at your draft coming up at some point during your live drafting season. You want to rock that Football Guys gear. Got a few trades, and do want to shout out. We got one FFPC, but clock's ticking. If you're listening to this show coming up on Thursday, that is the deadline to pare down your team. So that could be a big factor with FFPC trading this time of year. Whirlwind in a lot of the leagues I'm seeing. So FFPC super flex here, heavy hitters, Jordan. Heavy, super heavy hitters. You don't see Kyle Pitts and tight end premium moved a lot. Moved here. So we've got Kyle Pitts, Leonard Fournette, and 106 for Justin Jefferson, Travis Etienne, and Cole Kmet.
Why is this trade taking place?
Well, obviously someone needs to go 3-2 with their roster spots.
Why are you going 2-3? That's the initial thought that I had.
In FFPC, just generally, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, that's not a good idea. And then you start looking at it and you say, all right, like let's just set aside for a second Pitts and Jefferson. Just set
well,
that
I was going to say, is Pitts greater than Jefferson in FFPC?
I mean, it's tight end premium, right? So right. I do think if you have a solution at tight end in a tight format, it does make some sense, right? Because
you could roster one potentially,
right? Because if you look at the flip side of this, you're not feeling great rostering just Cole Kmet, right? So that's going to eat up another roster spot, especially in the superflex format. It's even tougher, right? All of these things are even magnified because you have to roster more quarterbacks. So it is a premium on that, right? So if you set aside Pitts and Jefferson for a second, then you look at it's Fournette and 106 for Etienne and Kmet. And I mean, Fournette over the next couple of years is pretty. I mean, I would think he's going to be pretty close to Etienne. We'll see what the tail of that looks like.
Well, you say pretty close. I mean, he could also lap him. I mean,
sure,
I know Etienne is a trendy, like, oh, what if he's healthy? What if Jacksonville takes a step forward? What if James Robinson's not a factor? What if they're good? Like that's a lot of what ifs. That
what
kind
if those things aren't true?
They kind of all. And what if Etienne's healthy? They kind of all have to be true, right?
Right.
If any one of those things falls apart, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't take a step forward, if James Robinson is a thorn, if Etienne isn't healthy enough to start the year or gain momentum or any of this stuff, man, this is a bloodbath.
Right.
This honestly is a bloodbath. Right. And it's really hard to say that on a side that you're giving up Justin Jefferson.
Right.
But let's face it, Cole Kmet, I don't know about you, Jordan. He doesn't move the needle. He doesn't get me all warm and fuzzies about like the upside he presents.
No, and I mean he's right. The difference between tight end, 7 and 20, right? It's the Cole Kmet of the right.
He breaks out with tight end 9. Right. I mean, I think it might be the most ho-hum 9 yards per catch. Like he got it done based on volume, and the team wasn't very good. And like it's going to be an ugly one that he's still not going to have a lot of cachet. I mean, and I think Fournette for 2 years could lap Etienne.
Yeah,
absolutely lap him.
Right.
So this Pitts and Jefferson part is just gravy. That Pitts is hard to get in tight end premium, period.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you just you break it into 2 deals, right? Because I would take especially in the format, you're taking Pitts over Jefferson.
I can't imagine though.
The other side's a win too.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
I've been in dynasty trading though. Like I've actually tried to any of the top 5 or 6 tight ends in FFPC. Just tried to get them. We got a share, paying a couple of later first, I believe it was for Mark Andrews, which you kind of reacted. I was just sending out offers, and you were just like, "Whoa, okay." Like you're like, "All right, I'm good with that." But like I can't imagine. I didn't go after in that deal or any of my other leagues. I don't even have frankly, sorry, Joe. I don't have the balls to go after Kyle Pitts. I mean, he is the one of one. I mean, if you're trying to get someone, he is. We can argue, should Andrews be on that level, but Pitts is the one that costs the most. And so, I mean, going after him, and again, giving up Kmet, getting Fournette and 106 back as part of the deal. My goodness. I mean, Pitts is just tough to get. That was my biggest point. And he's gettable. Apparently he's gettable. Plus. Yeah, apparently.
I mean, you wonder if the construct. I'd be really fascinated to like interview the person that did, like what was your thought process? You know what I mean? Because I think and this is I would just caution people on this.
They
Like
must
I think,
really value Etienne. Really value him.
yeah, or
It's
scared about
Superflex
depth,
106
right?
too. We didn't even say this. It's Superflex 106.
Right.
That helps the pick by maybe 1 or 2 slots with quarterbacks possibly in there. So
100%, right? So I think the way you would see this is, hey, Kmet, potential breakout, but but again, tight end 8 doesn't really help you, right? Even tight end 5 doesn't really help you that much. And you're giving up a ton of difference between pits.
And,
The other thing, maybe they were nervous about the Mariota stuff. I could
sure.
see that.
And you're projecting. I think again, if you're getting such a high leverage, like Fournette's upside is top 3, 4, 5. I mean, it's way up there. So
right.
I think you kind of got to loosen your straps on age a little bit with running back when the upside is that high. Like, we're not talking about someone that's just going to, oh, it's going to be running back 16. He's just going to be kind of a placeholder. Like, no, there's big upside here. And it's known. He's literally going back to the same team with Tom Brady. And everything occurred. Like, nothing. This is status quo. This is like this is like James Conner, right? This is the easiest projection to make.
Right.
When in doubt, inertia. Right. Assume similar situation.
Yeah, and even when you look at his profile from last year, he was 4th in terms of points per game. All the guys that were ahead of him had scored more than a touchdown a game. Fournette only scored 10. I mean, right? He scored 10 in 14 games, right? So you look at just with a little bit of, we call it puck luck. Running back 1 and overall isn't outside of his range of outcomes. I don't think. I would bet on that at even money, but you get the idea. Like, he is on a list of guys that should be considered.
That catch 50 plus passes and score 10 plus touchdowns. And that's, again, a list you can't put everybody on for sure. We have quibbles about most of running backs in one of those 2 regards. We don't talk much best ball. So I did find a best ball one in the Dynasty forums this week. If you want to contribute a trade, I don't say it enough, but you can go over there to the Shark Pool, highly active in Dynasty year round, and you can contribute your completed trades. And I get some of the quotes from there as well. So here we go. Superflex best ball, Tony Pollard. Again, it's interesting to see how much he's been traded for and for how long he basically has been unstartable for his career. I mean, it's a little bit of bad luck. He could be Madison. He could be, some of these other guys that have seen plenty of spot starts. But Pollard was traded for Mitch Trubisky, Will Fuller, and Trey Sermon in the best ball format.
I mean, you get the possibility of Will Fuller. I like that side a lot.
When they use the phraseology where they go so and so in best ball.
In best ball.
No, what we should say is Will Fuller only in best ball, like at this point, because the partial game factor, right?
Yeah,
the partial game factor is real. The injury prone is not a real thing, but if there was,
it's encapsulated. It's got
the contract year was the only year, Jordan. Man, that sounds a little fishy. What's that smell? Trout? Yeah. But I was shocked.
Does anyone else smell performance?
I was shocked for just me. Trubisky might be a full year of sample size. Could he be a bridge beyond that? Like, I'm really shocked that Pollard pulls this.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, this is a great way to do it, though, right? Like, you look at, I like this in terms of, compare this to the other trade for a second, right? Because you're taking a player that's not he's not a trump card in any way, right? And I think a lot of the injury away guys, we could sort of flip between them, right? I mean, Darrell Williams has outperformed Pollard, and Darrell Williams is still on the free agent wire. You know what I mean? This isn't super predictable in terms of the order of these guys go off with the production that they do. It ends up being who gets hurt and that opportunity that presents itself. So I think Sermon's a poor man's Pollard, but you're also getting Fuller, you're also getting Trubisky, and again, if you're right on either of those two,
right on either end, right? If you're right that Pollard is not a future NFL starter, if he is truly injury away, and that's sort of the best prism he's going to be in his career, then, and are you going to wait all the way with Pollard all the way to free agency or whatever is the trigger for that?
Yeah.
But at this point, I mean, Sermon is in that spectrum of being injury away. We'll see. They brought back Jeff Wilson, but yeah, like you said, Trubisky in Superflex, he's going to start. Like he's going to start games for you because he runs, and that Jalen Hurts. I mean, that gets you into top 6 weeks, top 10 weeks, things like that. So I think you have 3 guys that this is kind of the format for them. Because Sermon, even the games where it's like, oh, he should get some run. Do you feel comfortable putting him in a lineup? So he's kind of, in best ball at this stage. But I love what you said. We might put him in buckets for injury away running backs. We prefer these guys over, these 5 or, Madison, we've seen it, I think Connor was actually in that bucket before he started taking over last year. Pollard's in that bucket. But if you stay within that bucket, or you say, well, I can get all this other stuff by moving from tier 1 to tier 2 or 2 to 3, I think you really have to view it, like you said, in just sort of an aggregate utility bucket, and don't get too high on these guys. The Toby Gerhardt effect of like, oh, Pollard's going to get some big deal in 2 years and be considered some team starter. Maybe. Ask Chase Edmonds how that's going. Is it going great? I don't know if he'll ever be viewed. And let's not pretend like Pollard was a full-fledged starter in college. Teaser, he wasn't. So he's another one of sort of just a projection of, and Dallas hasn't viewed him. They have Zeke, I understand, but they still haven't really viewed him in that fashion, this whole pump up Pollard in his role. All right, we got one more. Big boys here yet again. 12 teams. We got Saquon Barkley, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is gettable, by the way. Like he's fallen quite a bit. Yeah. Jalen Waddle too. It's almost like his rookie year didn't do anything because now it's like, I don't want Pollard. I don't want Waddle. You want him? So we got Barkley and Tyreek Hill. Interesting profiles at where they stand, and J.K. Dobbins and Terry McLaurin.
This is super flex. I kid. Listen, I've been a little skeptical on Barkley, but this is a smash Barkley Tyreek side for me. I smash this side because either one of them has the ability to really tilt the league, where I don't think Dobbins can. And it's funny because you compare Akers and Dobbins, right? Akers comes back from this deal and he's, from his injury, and, he doesn't show that well, and everyone kind of is not disappointed he's falling, where Dobbins is out the whole time. And for some reason, everyone thinks that he's going to come back to a really high value running back receiving game in Baltimore.
Well, Etienne too, right? I mean, he doesn't play. Whoa, everything's great.
Yes. Right. And so we're left with this image of them that I think is frankly for Dobbins is unrealistic, right? I think Etienne may be a little bit different, but a high value receiving role, I would be stunned if that's there for Dobbins, right? I would be stunned if he approaches anything like, 45.
So he's got to be like a 15 touchdown guy and 6 yards per carry type guy.
Right. Yeah. Right. Which again, that's a lot to ask, right? I mean, that is and even when that does happen, it tends to middle into running back. Well, again, good, but if a best case scenario for a guy like Barkley, or even a best case scenario for a guy like Tyreek Hill, both are, I think, much further ahead of their comparative players at this position. And so
they've also done it. Like, that's the thing. Tyreek Hill has been an elite wide receiver 1 before. Saquon Barkley's been an elite running back 1. So to pretend so they've shown it. Terry McLaurin has been viewed, like if you listen to Washington sports radio, they will have you believe it, that he's a top 10, top 12 NFL wide receiver 1. And you start stacking it up. I mean, that is local homerism to infinity, in my opinion. McLaurin's been okay, and you can say he's been hampered by quarterback, but you know what? Wouldn't you say that could easily be the case this year again? So I don't, this whole idea, and I'm not the biggest, Tyreek paired with Tua fan out there, but again, those two guys have been there and done that at least once in their career.
Totally. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm a big fan of the Barkley Tyreek side.
And I'm glad you brought up Dobbins, though, because he is a little mystical of just how much love he gets. And I know he's a big time college player at a big time program, but he is not really on that guaranteed track of like, oh yeah, top 6 is coming. Watch this. And it's just, it would have happened this last year if he wasn't hurt. Because I don't think Lamar Jackson is the guy you want to be attached to at quarterback if you want strong PPR usage for the running backs there.
Right. Hey, by the way, it was last week that Tyreek Hill was traded. So we recorded on Tuesday last week. We recorded Wednesday this week. Some stuff going on in sort of the middle of for you. Again, we don't. This is like the first time since I think there's been one other time since we've been doing this show that we didn't record on a Tuesday night, and it was when my daughter was born. We don't record on Tuesday night this week, and I get COVID. So we got something wrong with this. But anyways. Last week, we discussed how Juju Smith-Schuster could have been, that he was basically this black swan type event that if something happened to Tyreek Hill or if something happened to Travis Kelce, all of a sudden you're sitting here with this like potential wide receiver one.
Got the recall.
It was 12 hours later. I literally rolled out of bed and I'm seeing like messages and stuff about like, he's, Tyreek Hill might be on the trade block. And I was like, what? And then he's traded in no time. I didn't even have after our conversation, I didn't even have the ability to.
This was like Kareem Hunt quick. If you remember Kareem Hunt, like when the video came out, it was like he was gone. Business day, end of business day, he was gone. And Tyreek Hill, it was just like you said, it was so quick.
Yeah.
But like we said, this is just another avenue, right? I think we talked about it with some injury running backs, like the Le'Veon Bell factor. There's more than one way. It doesn't take a player. Yes, they can get hurt, but they can get traded, suspended, off field, exempt list. I mean, there's so much stuff that can occur. And if you just need a little gap there, and all of a sudden now we're sitting with a Chiefs depth chart that's Juju Smith-Schuster and Marcus Valdez-Scantling. Try to say that 5 times in a row. But again, two guys that, frankly, I mean, they were pretty low value, and now you're looking at them completely different.
Right. Yeah, totally. Hey, by the way, so I have a funny story for you. So you're not a big game watcher, right? Like you don't watch, you don't
Wheel
sort
of
of
Fortune
prioritize. No, like
college basketball.
Like if you're out at like a restaurant, are you trying to watch are you trying to like sneak a peek at what's on TV or like not football really, right?
Well, you mean any sport? I mean, if it's a notable like if we were to go out during the Final Four, I'd be like, I want to see what's happening. Oh yeah, I'll sneak a peek. Actually, the missus is so nice. She'll be like, "Do you want to face the TV? Like, do you want to?" So I can look over. So yes, I'm common, sure.
So my wife is typically that way. So we went on like the second date we've been on since in like 2 years, right? We got a babysitter. We go out on a date.
Going after the nines here.
And it's Saturday.
Did you take a shower before?
I took a shower.
Whoa!
I did my hair, and I shaved. It was crazy.
Wow.
And then so we go out and we're having a drink, whatever. We're waiting to be seated. And we're watching, they've got the pregame festivities on. So I was like telling my wife about the Final Four, and she's like, "Yeah, we're not watching," or about there was the Elite Eight, and I was like, she's like, "We're not watching that." So I'm like, "Oh, all right, that's fine, whatever." So we go in to sit down, and again, this is a pro move here. You got to sort of understand these things. You always sit with your face to the television, so you can just at least see. You got to know, like, this is a lot of stuff going on here, and so so I made sure to align myself properly with the TV. And I was waiting for the game to come on, and we're just talking or whatever, and it doesn't go on. So finally, someone comes over and actually changes the channel to TBS, or excuse me, to CBS. And I was like, "Oh, all right." Well, someone asked them to put the game on, put it on CBS, but I didn't realize that the game wasn't on CBS; it was on TBS. Man, this is like a My Cousin Vinny type
wrong
situation.
BS.
It's the wrong BS. So it was a different BS, and So like this goes on for a while, and there's like an infomercial on. I was like, "What time has this game started?" I'm like totally disoriented. I'm whatever. And so I'm like, "Huh." So my wife goes to the bathroom again. You got to sit and you got to know how to work these things. She goes to the bathroom, and I come back and I look, I see it's halftime, and I was like, they got the wrong channel. So then I see it's TBS. So I was like, I flagged the girl down real quick. I only had like a minute. You got to make this thing happen. Flag the woman down. I was like, "Hey, listen, you guys got the wrong station." And she's like, looks at me like a 5-alarm fire panic. She's like, "Someone told us to change it to this." Like totally like, and I was like, no, you got CBS, not TBS. And she looks at me like this horrified, like she's seen like a ghost.
They wanted to see NCIS. What can you say?
It's there's a 5-alarm fire going on like in her brain, and I was like, just trust me. I was like, trust me, I got this right. I know what the person that asked you, I know what they're going through.
Basketball hasn't been on in a half hour. Trust me, it's the wrong channel.
Trust me, it's the wrong channel.
Half
And
time is not this long.
Changes it. It was perfect. We got to see the second half. My wife didn't know anything about it. I pulled it off in like 90 seconds. It was pretty good.
Look at that. Did you slow play it? You're like, I got the last minute here. 6 timeouts coming. We got a dessert. Whose game? You're just like, I thought of I thought of the expert move would be, you pull out, if there's chairs, you pull out the chair for the misses on the other side of where you want to be sitting. So it's like really you're being so nice, but really all you're doing is declaring where you want to sit.
That's great.
I know you've only been out twice in recent memory, but do you guys, if you're in a booth, do you do same side? Do you do opposite side?
No. People that sit on the same side, there's issues.
Whoa.
We gotta, no.
That's us.
Same side sitters. There's something
we said
weird
same
about
side
that.
sitters. Whoa,
oh man,
I would agree with you. There's something weird
going on there.
We do. We sit next to each other though, and part of it is we're just like, we've seen each other enough. Sit next to each other. I don't know. Mainly, it's about elbow room. If we're gonna have 3-4 plates, some tapas action, maybe some, some big cutting going on. I mean, you do want to be opposite. You don't want to be bumping elbows there.
Yeah. We used to we had a saying about same. We would always have fun about same side sitters when I waited tables. So it was always like. See, I always thought that when people same side sat, they would, or the man would. I always found there was a strong correlation between the man ordering for the woman and them being same side sitters. So,
wow,
yeah. So it always made me a little uncomfortable, because I always found like there was like I always thought it was my observation was it was always a power struggle. So that's why I don't do it. So.
It's my idea. So I don't know if that's the wrinkle.
Yeah,
it was my idea. I was like, no one does this. I was like, let's do this. Let's apparently throw off the serving staff. Hey, Jordan, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I haven't discussed this with anybody. This is real quick.
Okay.
So I ordered 2 appetizers. That's one of my moves. That's one of my pro efficiency moves. A lot of times it's about the same cost as an entree. So I got 2 of them. One of them, I'll just say there was 8 pieces. It was known that this appetizer has 8 pieces. Here's what happens. Server comes over and she either bumps the table or one of the pieces fell off, goes to the floor before she actually served it to the table and presented it. So my 8 shrinks to 7. She's like, oh, so sorry about that. She was like, I'll go put in another one. Mm-hmm. She leaves the 7. So time passes. Again, the whole meal's going on. In my brain, though, I'm clicking away. I'm like, it is something that needs to be cooked. It wasn't like a salad or something. So, and I start bringing it up. It was a table of 4. Again, all friends. We joke around and all that stuff. I was like, she said it was coming. I was like, is it coming? Like, is she just bringing one? I've seen awkward plates before where they like bring you a bun and they have to serve. They can't just hand it to you. Like, they have to put it on the plate. And I was like, is she going to bring just one? Because I think that's really cool to look at. But also, like, or do they have to make a whole order? Now it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Like it keeps going. And it's like not coming at all. I was like, well, she could have just said, so sorry about that.
Right.
But she alluded to the fact that more was coming. And then we get into the conversation of, well, there were 8. How about you stop complaining, crybaby? You got 7. And it's like, so I was like, where's the line? And so the table kind of agreed the lower the number, 1 is a bigger deal. 1 of 3 is a big deal, 1 of 5. But I was like, so 6 apparently for some was like, well, 6, you lose 1. I was like, well, then what about 7? Like, we're just going. So it never came. I did not say anything, but I did think it was weird that just don't say anything. Just say you're sorry. So where do you stand on does the number, like, it's not like 1 fry. You have a whole big thing of fries and 1 fry goes over. We're not talking fries. Like, I literally ordered an appetizer that was like pieces of stuff that was more pronounced than fries.
Oh, because you're not getting the full what you bargained for. Yeah, I mean it's probably a sliding scale, right? And the other thing, like, I don't know, if she told you it was coming, she should bring it, right? It's not a I'm really, or
she might have gone back and said, hey, I dropped one of these things. Can we do one? And they're like, no. Well, she didn't even tell me.
Right. And I don't know. You should err on giving more to the customer than.
Because you know what? We have a philosophy. Like, if they go above and beyond where it's like, it's okay if you charge me, but can I get some extra sauce or blah, 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 or whatever. And a lot of times in that situation, especially if they don't charge you, you tip extra. You're saying thank you for kind of going, coloring outside the lines a little bit. I know you didn't have to do this,
Right.
but yeah. Anyway, so I just felt it kind of interesting and awkward because it was declared on the menu how many I get, and now you start counting. You're like, well, obviously I don't have that number. It didn't bother me. It's not like I'm going hungry. I just there you go. It was an interesting restaurant situation.
Got it.
All right, and talking about interesting situation, don't be like your parents. Quotes from the Shark Pool, as well as we're going to open a PDF. Who wants to volunteer? Everyone backs up.
That's when that commercial happened, it was like that's the level of terror that was in that woman's eye when I was like, you have it on the wrong station.
Yep. There you go. She's like, I don't have remote control access. That's what it was. All right. I don't consider Najee Harris to Leonard Fournette much of a downgrade, if at all, in terms of production.
Oh wow. Yeah,
he didn't say longevity.
Yeah, I mean, over the next couple of years, it wouldn't. I mean, if they're close together, it wouldn't shock me. I think those trades are really interesting ways of getting upgrades at other positions.
What's the plus, and can you make that work? Because I always think deals like that are about survival, right? I mean, if you get even close in the neighborhood for a couple of seasons, then Najee Harris, a little older than people think, if he gets to 26 years old or so, game on. Let's see how the rest of that goes. If you got a future first, you got other assets that turn into something, then, I mean, again, you get all the way 2 years from now. It sounds like not that long. It is in your dynasty lifeline in that league. That other GM may not even be around. So I do think those always like arbitrages of can you replicate the production a little bit for a fraction? And Fournette is obviously in the crosshairs of a deal like that. James Conner as well.
Yeah. I like this pivot. But I would make sure to you don't take a couple of pieces back. Like you want a core other piece coming back, and whether it's a pick. I like this move at wide receiver in particular. I think at running, I don't do it at quarterback or tight end. I think at running back or wide receiver, this is a type of move that's okay. But you're looking for an upgrade at another spot, whether that's take a jump from a good quarterback to a great one, right? That's because there's a big gap there, I think, in terms of market perception between Fournette and Harris. Take a big jump, right? Maybe this is the jump that gets you from, Cole Kmet to Darren Waller, something like that. Like that type of, just to use some guys we've been talking about before, that type of sort of climb. That's the type of bet you're trying to make, not, I want to get, some fringe, a Michael Pittman and Cole Kmet thrown on the back of it, right? Don't do that. Make the downgrade with the shot of an upgrade at another position.
Or it gets you at Superflex quarterback. It maybe gets you from a Jalen Hurts and a riskier profile to a Russell Wilson or a Deshaun Watson, or again, someone like you said that might end up being the best player in the deal 2, 3, 4 years from now when everybody else expires, and you're still thumping around, in your later 20s with a quarterback like that. This is a good one and a good reminder. I remember not too long ago, you couldn't trade Leonard Fournette for a pack of Skittles. And that's that offseason. I remember, was it round 5, 6 of startup drafts?
Yep.
And he was missing games yet again for Jacksonville and just trying to put it together, but quietly, again, on a per game basis, a guy that was just churning out running back one seasons. Not a lot of people wanted him. And all of a sudden he gets quote unquote healthy, injury prone, not anymore, goes to a Tampa Bay and Tom Brady offense. Looks like the top 5 pick he was.
Yeah. I mean, and here's this is always funny because we looked at it and said for a while, like, hey, this is a really high upside situation, right? What do we know? First round running backs tend to be high performers once they sort of get on the board, and they tend to have dense hits. Those things have been true for Fournette. And he's been good for a really young age. We talked, I think it was either last episode or a couple episodes ago, about how he's actually he has more wins in the playoffs, 5, than Jacksonville has since they released him 4. And you sort of look at the longevity, now he gets paid, right? Now it's a longer deal. And you sort of see, with guys like him, sometimes it's a patience play. I mean, our play right now on Josh Jacobs is like, all right, if he were to ever meld the two things, he has the Fournette upside, right? He has a top 3 to 5 ceiling in his range of outcomes because we've seen him get 50 plus catches. We've seen him rush in, basically a touchdown a game. If he were to do them both, we know that he's capable of doing them independent of each other, which wasn't really linked to him not being able to do it in a specific season. It just didn't come together for a variety of reasons. But he can do both. And so you sort of look for situations like that. And listen, if the market's going to sort of poo-poo that, if the market's going to be down on that, that just means it's cheaper to acquire and the upside's greater at a lower risk. I mean, that's, those bets are the great bets to take, right? Because the payoff can be really big at a small price.
Yeah, and an interesting question on Josh Jacobs this today, because it was regarding that I was a fan of going Travis Etienne and a small secondary piece to move to Josh Jacobs. And I said, well, Jacobs is kind of what you're hoping for from Etienne, first round pedigree, and he's got a couple hits. Etienne has 0 and has big time upside. I mean, you could say that the situation looks better today than it looks 2 years ago for Josh Jacobs to hit as a higher running back 1. And so it's like, it just make it simple, right? I mean, you're taking a lot of risk on Etienne. Haven't even seen him in the NFL. Jacobs, 2 years in, it's not like he's 27. We're not talking about pivoting to an old running back. And the upside, you've seen a lot more. And I almost feel like, some of these guys like David Montgomery and, it ends up hurting them if they don't hit for a giant season in the first 2 or 3 years. I think a lot of people assume it's not there. And so to me, it like, give like 212 to move from Etienne to Jacobs. That's a no brainer. Like, just take the profile, you're guaranteed a double or higher, like if not a triple, and the home run is still in play. Etienne has the whole range. I mean, we've seen, the Sony Michel type situation, Rashad Penny. I mean, what if Etienne doesn't even get through September this year? I mean, where are we? Rashad Penny is kind of the answer, but I mean, not the low level answer is not good. So all that is in play. Like, how about you take that out of play? Is my take on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the don't hit the ball, right? Like, I mean, that's put the driver away, hit 3-wood, and don't hit the ball, into the road. Right?
Yeah, you take the water out of play. Or
right.
I don't know, a story for another day. But I went golfing in the past couple months, and it was my first time playing in 20 plus years. But yeah, I did that so often. Like, I wanted to avoid the catastrophic. Like, can I avoid the quadruple bogey? And there were certain holes and certain settings where you're like, let's just take this out of play. I learned really early, I couldn't chip worth a darn. Like, I chunked 1 or 2, and I was like, you know what? If I'm close to the fringe, I'm putting it. Because you know what? I know I'm going to get it far. Like, the downside of doing that is, like, it's going to shave 2 strokes off the worst case. So anyway, because I wanted to be respectable. I wanted my final score. I wanted to play the back 9 better than the front 9. All these little stupid little things that don't matter at all now. Regardless of your team makeup, is there any reason to prefer a 23 first from a probable playoff team over pick 104 this year? Is there any circumstance?
Well, I mean, I would say about a probable playoff team, we don't really, as a general rule, we don't believe in that. I don't know, and this is like the second, and you can probably help me on this. We were having a text conversation about this, about basically moving from 106 to 104. I don't know if there's a huge, I don't know, and maybe the answer is, right, that's why you do it. Is that we don't know? I don't get the sense.
Don't know where tier breaks are. Yeah.
Right. I don't get the sense there's a tier break as I sit here right now that's affected by that move, but that puts me in play for the idea that a Clyde Edwards-Helaire situation could happen, or that
you have 2 more players on the board. That deductive, obvious guy will report that you have 2 more options to you at 104.
Right.
But 104 is crazy high. Like, the whole conversion of current pick to future year. Typically, I mean, even in a bad year, you're trading 108, 109 for a future first straight up. In good years, it might drift all the way to 111, 112. And then, sometimes you can even, with that later first, last 3, 4, 5 picks, you get a pick, is it late second? Is it early third this year? So you have those as options. 104, I mean, you have got to think it's the worst class in the world. And I would say, number one, you don't do that now. Number two, you want it, like you said, Edwards-Helaire or some great landing spot. in Superflex, do quarterbacks go higher than expected or something
Right.
occurs to help you out in the top few picks. So 104 to me is just, it's nuttiness that you would take the chance that it is, I mean, deductive reasoning, it's not good odds that you get a higher pick next year. And the time value is real. So
Right. I guess the other thing too is like it rules out the ability that you can't do better than that on the clock, right? I mean, that you can't get a mid-second, and and I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but there was like even in classes like the Zeke class, there was another class.
That was a hard one. 2019 was hard
that the
too.
Jacobs year?
Was that the Jacobs N'Keal Harry one?
You could still do that though, because people would come up for it. Like that was Darrell Henderson, right? Like
I remember
who it is, but it'll happen, right?
There's going to be
someone there that'll happen.
Me bailing on 102 in that league. I remember there was one where I was like, I need to bail, and I ended up moving. I think it was 102 for the future first. I moved to like 201, and then I also got like a tight end that was startable for me. But that was like, I can't believe I'm selling this low, but that is grinding my way through the absolute best on the clock I could possibly get. But still, that's 201. That's a future first. And that was a class that was that would have been the N'Keal Harry pick at 102. So it worked out just fine in retrospect with Jacobs being gone. But yeah, this is not one of those classes. And to bail in March or early April, I mean, you've made it this far. Like what's the line with Shawshank? I mean, if you've come this far, maybe you're willing to go a little farther. And how about like, what's the danger of going all the way to the NFL draft?
Right.
No running backs in the first 2 rounds.
Right.
No 2 wide receivers in the first round. Like, I don't think these things are realistic options based on the data points and the conversation and the mock drafts and all that kind of stuff that we have at our disposal at present.
Yeah, and I went back and I looked in that 2019 class, that Jacobs class. I actually traded down twice. I don't know why I just didn't stick and pick Jacobs, but it ended up being good. I went 101 for basically a mid first and a 2020 first, and got Kenyon Drake added in. That was when Kenyon Drake had some value, and then I moved 108 for 209 in a future first, which ended up being 106. So I mean, those are there. Right?
Yeah. I mean, those are, and that's even again considered at the time a down class,
right? So because someone will rise into that range, like it will happen. And if it's a receiver, I mean, all you need is someone to land with Kansas City in a trade up, right, or Green Bay in a trade up, and all of a sudden 104 looks really good, right? Or there to be,
or 104 could be running back 2 that ended up going in round 2, and because a couple wide receivers are ahead of them, or a super flex quarterback. The problem I have is that I think a lot of people do way too much projecting with way too much confidence on this is a good class, this is a bad class. And yes, we're a month away from declaring that, at least with the data points we have. But I mean, to proclaim next year as really good and this year is obviously much worse, be super careful about having much confidence in those types of statements.
100%.
Because we don't know who's declaring. I mean, Travis Etienne, for goodness sake, came back for his senior year. Nick Chubb came back for his senior year. I mean, yeah, it's defined by underclassmen. We get that. But you don't know who the underclassmen are until you get there. All right, last one, and it's a quick one. For a second, I would buy Chase Claypool everywhere I could. Ben was not good for him.
Ben wasn't good for anyone. It seems like a reasonable price. I don't know if I'd have to look and see if that's a gettable price for him.
It was. I mean, I think that was the valuation discussed.
Yeah. I would probably shoot. There's other people that I would get for a second, right? I mean,
let's say this. I mean, he's in the upside wide receiver interesting bucket. If we were to put generalized tiers, that's him. Young guy, he's shown some stuff. Is there big upside there? Yeah, you could say that about a cross section of the young wide receivers as well. We'll see if Trubisky is the unlocking mechanism. Otherwise, it's probably going to be a rookie quarterback in some short order under center. So we'll see. But yeah, Juju not being there, frankly, he wasn't a huge factor in those 2 seasons anyway. So
yeah, so he's going off wide receiver 30 in the last month of startup drafts. Chase
Yeah,
Claypool
that's
is.
more like a later first, probably, right? Later first,
Yeah.
early second.
905 is around his
Yeah,
range. He's going behind Bateman, which is interesting.
probably
Going
probably
behind
10 to maybe 16 overall. Does that sound about right
something
in
right
rookie
there.
picks?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's all right.
so again, he's in that bucket where, if I'm getting somebody that's truly a core guy, I wouldn't let him stop me. I
Mhm.
wouldn't let they ask for Claypool or instead of somebody else, I wouldn't let that stop me. But I have some shares and I like the upside possibilities that I do recognize that Ben wasn't helping him. So I do agree
Right.
with that secondary
What's
part.
the do you think, like, if you look later on, is there guys that have a like a bigger ceiling potential? I there's like 2 or 3 of them that I see just looking down the list. You look at Michael Thomas, wide receiver 38 in the last month.
Jordan, don't go so old. You have to go super young
I'll
where
go
they've done
young. I'll
less.
go
You can't.
young for
No, no,
you.
no. I'm just saying
Kadarius
you can't
Toney.
go. You
Let's go
can't go
Kadarius
so.
Toney.
That's
I'll go
right.
young for you. Kadarius Toney, 36, and then Juju at 39.
What do you
Right? I
think?
mean,
What do you think the Claypool for Tony plus? What do you think that plus is?
um, I mean, I think there's probably a bigger chance that Tony just falls over and whiffs. You're like one of those
Yeah.
cartoon characters, swing and miss type, batting practice type things, and like Looney Tunes. Like there's a bigger chance that he just totally falls over. But I think there's a bigger chance that he's a huge difference maker too. Right? I just think he's got a wider range of
The
outcomes.
image I just got was the Looney Tunes, where they play the enemies or whatever, and he
Yeah.
throws like the curveball, and it literally starts slowing down, and then the ball will like stop and all this stuff, and they swing at it. Strike one, strike two, strike three. I think he struck like 3 guys out with just one pitch because they all took swings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Claypool feels like you wouldn't be surprised if he has another couple of years where it's like 9, 10, 11, 12 points per game. And we're still kind of waiting for it. And the whole time, Deontay Johnson's better. And whether or not they finish upgrade quarterback to actually support 2 top guys in the top 12 or 24, that might be the linchpin. So it kind of keeps you on the hook. The good thing about Tony is I think we'll learn more this year, more definitively, right? Like either he takes a big step forward or maybe he's hurt a lot again and he falls in price some more, or Galladay is actually the alpha or something.
Right.
Like, I do think it's more telling.
And you go back to that 2020 season for him, right? Like, let's just go back and actually put Chase Claypool in context for a second. You go back to that 2020 season. He finishes as wide receiver 17. Again, you can go over to Football Guys, check out all the historical stats. You can lose 3 or 4 days of quarantine in that. I'm going to check it out and try. But we're going to, you just go back, look at the 2020 stats. Chase Claypool was, he actually, hold on, I didn't sort the right weeks. Chase Claypool, wide receiver 22. That includes 2 rushing touchdowns and 9 touchdowns. So
in that week he scored 50 or
right. 9 touchdowns receiving.
Yeah.
So 11 touchdowns. When you look at when you put him in comparison, that's basically tied for 5th at the position in terms of total touchdowns. And then that's only on, you just sort of compare how outlier that was in terms of what he actually did. He was 35th in terms of actual receptions, right? So all of those things sort of like, hey, there was like an end around. Didn't he score like 2 end arounds in like back-to-back weeks or something?
One was
I
like
remember
a
it was
goal line one too.
right.
Yeah.
And I think it was like early in a week too, or early in the season, if memory serves too. So like,
he was a shooting comet in the first 5-6 weeks. So it kind of sustains, right? Like people forget about it because he still stays high in per game, even if he sags a little bit.
Right. So it's a primacy recency deal. And so that just sort of anchors in the brain, as a star, where it's like, okay, is he really a top 5 touchdown guy on like the 35th most receptions? Like which one of those is more predictable? I'll just go with the reception count, right? Because there's a bigger sample on all that and everything. So that's sort of my, I guess my quick and dirty on Chase Claypool, and I think it's tepid. But when you look at a guy like Kadarius Toney, I mean, elite stuff in terms of yards per route run, in terms of points per route run, in terms of the he's targeted on a huge percentage of his routes last year, which is those are things that you're like, wow, like there's actually something there. And we'll see again. And we've seen Michael Thomas. We've seen what Juju Smith-Schuster has been. We know what he could be. So I sort of look at that range. Like I agree with the premise of taking the bet on a 2nd round rookie pick. I might not be in on for Chase Claypool, it might be other guys. The Juju Smith-Schuster thing might be out the window as well at this point. But
yeah, and I do think, at least in the short term, and that is what we were blending, short term and long term for Dynasty, and you could look it through either prism, that the short term, that equation, if he's not going to be the wide receiver one for his team, man, they better be a good passing game and they better have a good quarterback. And I think both of those are question marks. You've got Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth as elements too, that those are better than maybe your average pass catchers at those positions across the NFL at large. So there's some things situationally working against Chase Claypool. Like you mentioned, if he doesn't have that perfect storm with touchdowns, that volume, it might be tough to have considering the depth chart, where you look at Juju, when you look at Michael Thomas, and they might have a lower percent chance of staying with their dynasty value over the next 18 months, but they also have a much better shot of being the alpha of their team and getting 150 targets that Chase Claypool, like, I don't know. I mean, if Deontay Johnson were out, maybe he gets there, but that's still not necessarily a guarantee with that sort of target load, that alpha load. So those are, situationally some things where you might have some pause. And part of it for me would be the price point, that when you're talking about a late first, let's say, if we're venturing into that neighborhood, the flexibility you don't have with Claypool, as opposed to the pick, or saying, well, I don't have flexibility, but I also have some limitations on when I can use them in my lineup.
Yeah.
You're kind of boxed in. I mean, not to say roster clogger, but I did say it in a roundabout way of saying that might not be the most optimal way to spend roster spots, especially if you have 2 or 3 Claypools.
Right. And if it's a future, like, there's a difference between paying that price right now and paying it in future price. Right. So again, if we're talking about seconds, I'd much rather make that bet with the second right now, because then I have the flexibility of my future seconds down the line, versus making the bet with a future second and then trying to also pick someone with again, now you're clogging your roster even more and giving up all your liquidity. Like, make that, if you want to do that, make the bet with it now, make that bet now, and don't make it in the future.
Excellent point to close. There you go. From Jordan McNamara, we talked a lot about studs in various formats in our dynasty trading this week.
My voice made it through barely.
You did about 6 pauses, 7 pauses, but you know what? That's how we pass the ball back and forth. We're playing that 2-man John Stockton, Karl Malone game. Yeah. Someone's got to finish.
A lot of give and goes to Chad today. Yes,
exactly. Pick and rolls. And Dynasty Orphans up at the top. What's some criteria? This is a prime time if you're listening to this right away after it gets released. The next few days, again, a lot of people fill spots as early April gets rolling this time of year. And then, of course, finishing with some profile talk. Chase Claypool, I thought that was maybe the most innocuous quote I've ever picked. And sure enough, it turns into 5 minutes, on upside. 10 minutes on upside, wide receivers, roster construction, and the Steelers at large, and Chase Claypool specifically. So love when content rolls that direction. So I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues. I make all the